Welcome to the Decentralized Consciousness Podcast, second episode of the new season. Today, I'm speaking with Odo. Odo, how are you doing this morning?
Amazing.
Good.
Really open and excited to what's coming.
Yeah, me too. So today, we're obviously going to let flow take us wherever it's going to take us. But to begin, I think I want to start by talking about your journey down your spiritual rabbit hole, and however it mixed with your Bitcoin rabbit hole, I'm sure the two intertwine, because we are in decentralized consciousness after all.
Mm.
So you want to start by telling me a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, it's been a while. I've been in this time-space reality for 47 years now. And I remember at my very early age, probably that's one of my earliest memories. It's so vivid in my mind that I don't even think that it was in the past, but it's an ongoing all the time. I actually asked my mom the other day if she remembers that, and when I told her, I saw a spark in her eyes. And I remember being, what was that? Probably 4 or 5, I think, that I asked my mom, if I wasn't me, would I be somebody else? And this question keeps coming up all the time, maybe like a constant wake-up call, like a constant thing to remind me that there is much more to life than what we can see or what we can think. And then an interesting thing happened. My experience with life was that at some point, I probably at around 20, when I was faced with the fact that I need to earn my own living and start working, somehow fear crippled in. Somehow I put all the awareness that I was wrapped in aside, and the internal dialogue would go like, I only need to do this, and then I will have time for awareness. And then I only need to do that, and then, and that, and then. So it was always, one action away. And obviously, the fear crept in. I can actually see that from a very different perspective now. So what I am realizing is that I was faced with this awareness, and then I needed to get lost in all the shadows just to come out of it again 24 years later. This was a very very interesting and very tough, very painful and severe journey. It was enjoyable at the same time, but looking back, it was very, very deep and dark. And when I look back now, it seems like a minute passed. So all those 24 years of being in the shadows seem like a minute now. So all of a sudden now, I've been for at least 3 or 4 years, I think it's 4 years since my last wake-up call, which was very, very, very hard on me because I couldn't sleep for 1.5 years. And so it is like literally a wake-up call. So I was awake for most of the days and most of the nights. And the interesting thing that happened was that my when I wanted to go to sleep, I just couldn't. But I hear people have this experience of mind attack or mind constantly running, or they're overthinking, sometimes they say. It was nothing like that for me. It was more like if you take a film or a microfilm where all the data of my life has been recorded on. So if you take this microfilm and you go, when sometimes people went to the library to see everything on microfilm before the internet. So it's like this microfilm kept rolling and rolling and rolling, and with no connections whatsoever, scene to scene. Everything all at once. All my life, all people, all the music I wrote, all lyrics I wrote, everything was just passing, running through my mind, and I just couldn't do anything about it. So it was not my overthinking, the way I understand when people say that overthink, but it was more like just a slideshow or a movie going on. And then it dawned to me at some point that this is actually all the shadows. So the experience of being awakened was first, all the shadows need to run through, need to be somehow revisited, or I don't know what that means. It's very important at this point to understand that I've been speaking now for 5 minutes, and I was using language, and it's very hard to explain. It's actually impossible to explain anything with language, because we are creatures of emotions and feelings, and you can see that whenever you want to use language, you actually want to express something that's happening in the frequency field. And the language is only a very, very uncertain approximation of what's going on. So it's undescribable, basically. But yet, I'm saying it just to maybe invite someone who will resonate with that. So that was what was happening. And if I introduce to this narrative now the Bitcoin, Bitcoin came when I was in the middle of this shadows. So it was 2008-9 when I first heard about it, maybe 10, when a colleague of a colleague said that I should buy some. And I was so doubtful and so uninterested. It's really amazing how fear and how shadows just wouldn't let me see at that time. But nothing was really lost. It just realization how fear disables everything in the frequency field. So coming back to today, I wasn't very much interested in cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, because I was told and at the previous halving that Bitcoin cannot grow. I didn't understand anything about Bitcoin. So I was more introduced to other cryptocurrencies, again, from people living in fear, and I was, again, still full of fear, financial fear. And I got burned a lot. And that coincided with my awakening. And then all I was left with really was to surrender. And it seems like I was the doer of everything of this, but it's so much different. It was done through me. So everything that happened had to happen. And I was actually not doing it. I wasn't even afraid, if you know what I mean. The fear was just grasping me. So I realized that by trying to do anything, it will only get worse. So I immediately understood that the point is not to do more. The point is not to do different things. The point is not to go find another teacher, another solution, or another meditation, another yoga practice, or Pilates, or whatever. The point was to stop fully, to stop doing things. And maybe this equals surrender. And then from that point on, I was introduced to Bitcoin by Sama Kotaro, and he made sure that I do my own research. And then I started researching, and this was another epiphany in my life. In the 90s, when I was growing up, I realized that pretty much everything is going to ruin. All the relationships, all the faculties that we have, all the technology is advancing, but it's got its own consciousness, and we are not prepared for that. And so basically, I kind of knew that. I usually said that we need an alien to save us. We need some alien species to come here and save us, because it seems that we're going to ruin ourselves. And then when I started discovering the mechanics in Bitcoin and what it means, I realized that there are only two options. One is that this is it, and the other, if this is a fraud, then aliens. Yeah. So before now, aliens reach us, maybe Bitcoin will help us understand how, on a mechanical or on a technological level, what being connected means. But it's much more to Bitcoin than just being the first in cryptocurrency. It's much more, and that's what I'm interested in. It's something that, oh gosh, it's really hard to describe this in words. It's a consciousness in itself, and by being that is far more advanced than our consciousness, our awareness of our consciousness in humanity at this point is. I see a lot of people getting awakened. I see that people are beginning to flow, beginning to understand, beginning to surrender. But it will take some more time for the whole humanity to wake up, I think.
Yeah. Great story. I really appreciate you sharing that. So I'm curious, you spent 24 years basically in the fiat consciousness. And what was it? Was there a tool? Was there a person? Was there something you read that came to you and basically broke you free? Was it a meditation? Yeah, see, for me, there was a couple of books that kind of were the lead up to my spiritual journey. It was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And then there was another one called The Science Behind the Secret. And then eventually the book, The Secret, actually. So I'm curious if anything like that came to you and started you down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say exact things. What is really interesting is that as I said in the beginning, at a very early age, I already understood everything. But then these shadows needed to be dealt with, or needed to be faced with and dissolved. And in the meantime, I would say that it all started very, very a long time ago. I think the first would be, if I exclude the Bible, which is misinterpreted probably most of the time, the first book that reached me was Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And it was so flabbergasting how each time I read that book, it seemed like I was reading as a different person. But this book didn't really make the shadows go away, because this was before shadows. So then when the fiat shadows, fear, uncertainty, doubt, terror came, that was more like all the time in the making, just to be dissolved with. And in the middle of that time, I would say around in 2009, at the same time, see, this is a nice coincidence which don't really exist. So at 2009, okay, let's discover this now. In 2009, I visited United States, LA, a friend there with whom I worked, and he introduced me to Byron Katie. So Byron Katie has had an epiphany in I think 90s or early 2000s, and she wrote some books, and she invented let's say a mechanism how to come to certain terms with your programs or your patterns or your determinism. So her work is called The Work, and she's got 4 questions there that everyone can ask. And now I realize that is a very good beginning on a path of awakening. So that was a very interesting moment. 2009, we could easily say the advent of Bitcoin coincided with my getting to know Byron Katie. And but then later on, my organism or this body-mind mechanism eluded the awareness again and again and again. And the interesting thing was that I was hearing the voice inside all the time, but just couldn't do anything about it. And this at the same time means that I was not doing anything about it because I was being done, you can say, by the universe. So the next thing that really pops up is, and this is a huge step from Byron Katie now, and that is the book by Nisargadatta Maharaj, I Am That. So I was with my friend. She invited me to come visit her, and there was this bookshelf with not too many books on it, and there was this book, yellow black, sticking out, and I checked that and I asked, what is that? And then she said, yeah, I got it. I don't even remember where she got that book, but I asked if she read it, and she said that not yet in her wholeness, because it's very difficult or something like that. And then I picked it up and saw a few lines, and immediately, people say that all these books by enlightened teachers or by the really awakened people, all those books have a transmission in them. And I understood pretty well that here's another topic opening. So this is knowledge. I could read a lot of things. I read a lot of books in my life, and I find a hard time remembering exactly what I read, and I'm amazed by people who can keep in their minds all the fables and all the structures and all the whatever they read. But at this point, I really got to realization that it is not important to remember what I read, because every person has a frequency, and every book by that person is transmitting that same frequency. So the higher the frequency of that person, and the higher the awakening state, or you can call it enlightenment in the end, but this is all just concepts. The idea is that in that book, I Am That by Nisargadatta, I just after reading few lines, I realized that I'm not reading the words, that something is entering me. I later on, actually last year, I was in a retreat with Roger Castillo, and we talked at lunchtime about that book, and he said that he's read it 7 times, and that every time he read it, he thought that that was a different book, and I resonated with that, although I haven't read it even once in its wholeness. So what we both laughed about was that with this book you can read one paragraph, which is like 4 or 5 lines, and the mind stops working. It just switches off the mind, and after 5 lines we laughed about the fact that you just go to sleep. So this is the moment where the mind shuts itself off, and you need to go to a certain state where this transmission is making its own healing and entering this energy body and is being actually transformed or transmuted to your now higher and higher and higher frequency. So that was a very, very big deal. And yeah, I put that book aside for now. I think I've come as far as 20th chapter, but I learned along the way that everything is a process, and I will get back to this book when it invites me again. But the awareness that came to me through that book is just, this is like a construction working organism rebuilding everything from, so the teaching would be top down, but actually is rebuilding from bottom up, and it's the most powerful thing I came across.
It sounds very, very cool. It makes me wonder, what role does memory and rationality play in our lives? What do those things mean to you?
Memory and rationality.
Yeah, like yesterday, I was exploring, why do we have memory? Why do we have this tool as human beings? And I think there's an obvious answer biologically for survival. If I remember that a plant is poisonous or an animal is dangerous, or I remember, what my child looks like, so I might help him or her survive in the wild. But outside of that, why is memory necessary? Why do we use this thing in order to guide our lives? And should we be using it to guide our lives?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. It's a in-depth question that really can't be easily answered. Maybe we can approach this from the other end. Beside the survival, which is obviously for this time-space reality a good thing, to have memory. I don't think that really, maybe it's not even memory. Maybe it's just understanding. So when I hear the word memory, The frequency of the memory in my experience is more like the suffering part. So understanding which plant is poisonous is maybe understanding of life, is maybe you can call it knowledge. But the suffering memory would be the pictures from the past and the relationship to those pictures. So the relationship is either pleasure or pain. And at the same time, this memory is part of mind. Some people will say it's the same thing as mind, ego, memory, imagination. Everything comes from the past in relation to the now. So if we divide the illusion of time into memory, now, and future, then actually we need to either scientifically or emotionally or with a higher consciousness understand that past is past. It doesn't exist. So the memory of that past is the relation of our being not in the now, but reaching towards something that brought us either pain or pleasure. So it's actually missing the now. Because we have a certain relation to this pleasure or pain further on. And this could most probably comes from our belief in our personal doership. So for a painful memory, this would be I did something wrong, or I was wrong, or I was bad. And the pleasure one would be that you enjoyed something so much that you wanted to repeat it. So that's another version of suffering. So the pleasure in itself is just another version of suffering, and the memory that is coming up is actually a pattern, some kind of pattern showing up that we want to be in out of the now. Maybe the painful moment right now is too painful, and then we need to go to fetch the pleasure one from the memory. Or we take a painful moment in the now and extend it by means of our thinking mind. So let's say you hit your foot in the edge of the bed and it really hurts, and then it hurts in the moment, but then maybe you've hit your foot 10 times in the last 2 months, and there's a story going on. Why is this happening to me all the time? And that's extension of pain going further on. It brings up memories, and it actually brings up projections that it will keep happening. And we are missing the now. So if we bring into this equation the rationale, then is our mind is an amazing tool it comprises of two parts, I think, or more. It's really important to understand that I'm talking concepts here. So nothing that I say is really, it's really the truth. It's just trying to describe our way of living or our way of being in a way that might be closer to truth. But it's not, it cannot ever be truth in itself. So this rational mind, or let's call it just mind in two parts, which is a working mind and a thinking mind. So the working mind is an amazing tool. It actually makes you remember that some plant is poisonous, or it makes you calculate things that you can build a house. But the thinking mind, this is where we want to know. This is where we want to understand. This is where we want to keep thinking, to be sure. And at the very moment of trying to be sure, that's at the same time an invitation to see why we need to be sure, why we need to know what will happen when we know. Although everyone now says, everyone of some status will say, either a scientist or an awakened teacher, that you cannot ever really know. So why do we want to know? And then from that invitation, why, how come, all those questions open up the shadows in which we, in which our, light has subsided, and is now time to bring it back on. So, yeah, I hope I answered at least a little bit your question or your invitation to how I see those things. So yeah, memory and rationale is like, to me, both things, just an invitation to basically suffering and not being able to enjoy the now. But I need to be very clear that we cannot enjoy the now by force. So if we are dragged into memory, or if we are dragged into rationale, then there's a very important reason for our conditioning to be doing so. And we need to be ready to accept, allow that, understand that. Why? Because this is our protectors of the now being too painful. And coming to the now and facing the pain and dissolving the pain is the way to go. But this is very scary usually.
Yeah, this is a very deep topic, and let's use the example, since it's a little bit more simple, of stubbing your toe on the bed.
Yeah.
If you are to go deeper into that pain, what does that process look like?
Well, you have two things regarding pain. One is pain in the moment. So it's like you hit your foot and it's like, ow. That's what life is about. It will be from pain to pleasure all the time. Everything that happens in duality is like either pain or pleasure. You can check for yourself, everyone can check for yourself, for themselves, and it's something we find pleasurable, something we find nice, and something else we don't find that nice, or we find it bad, we find it wrong, we find it painful. And hitting the foot is like pain in the moment, which is in the now, it's pain, and that's all there is. What we intend to do then is unconsciously develop a story. As I said, if you hit your foot in the bed many times, or we can introduce another example of, let's say, you're driving a car and you always get to the point where somebody is in front of you going too slow. So that is always a pain because you're probably in a rush. Now, this is a pain in the moment, but if that's happening on and on every day, if you notice the pattern, then without not if you notice the pattern, but before you notice the pattern, the emotional body is telling you, oh, this is painful, this is painful, this is painful, and then the thinking mind comes in and says, this has been happening for a very long time, because thinking mind is convinced that the time is real. And then the thinking mind develops a story, and it says, there's something wrong with people. People cannot drive. People don't know how to drive. You are the best driver in the world. Or it can say, why is this happening to you all the time? You should something. You should. Trying to find a solution. But from this pain. So these stories that we live in, they're like a roadmap to what is actually happening in the depths. And in this case of driving a car and being in the story of I'm the best driver and everybody sucks because I cannot drive faster, because they all drive so slow in front of me, and that's a story to see why is this happening. Is it trying to say something? Is it trying to bring to is it actually trying to protect you from some deeper feelings? Because this superiority feeling of I'm better than them because they're slowing me down is like, okay, this is something that wants to protect me from what I'm really feeling deeper down, which is probably frustration. But then under frustration, because frustration is basically anger with a story. So then we can see the anger, we can feel the anger, but then we can see the story behind it. The story could be I'm the best, or you should all move, or actually the story is usually not in agreement with what is. And the fact is that somebody is driving in front of you, and that's the only fact. Maybe the fact is how fast they're driving, but my relation to that speed is like, there's something wrong with the reality that I'm seeing. And the irony is that I, as a driver in this superiority attitude, I am the creator of the reality, my own reality. And if we dissolve this example really quickly, is I am creating the driver in front of me because I need this pattern resolved. When I'm saying I, this is the big I, this is the consciousness itself, is inviting my awareness to come to the dissolution of this pattern, so the universe can expand through this body mind even further. And that goes for every human being. So I, as the driver, am creating the other driver in front of me to piss me off, so I can come to terms, or I can come in connection with the deeper feelings that need to be resolved. And this is my own experience I'm talking about, way back. And I don't, it's really rarely now that this happens to me, but it used to happen to me all the time. So this is how the energy fields then get dissolved, get healed, shift. And now, even if that happens, there is no more charge towards it. I can easily see it. And this is where now the working mind, if we go back to the working mind has now learned that, this was the process that happened. And now it's not either happening that often, or if it does happen, the working mind steps in and says, I understand what's going on. So actually the working mind has learned to step aside and not go into thinking, overthinking mind, and back into the loop of the story, which is then in itself a pattern.
You covered so much there that was really, really inspiring for me, and couldn't resonate more with everything that you're saying. You know, I love the example. I love both of these examples because they are so relatable. But the first, being stubbing your toe on the bed, is, it's like an opportunity for a very, very strong reflection.
Yeah.
Of, it's like a very, very strong reflection of reality to say, hey, pay attention, right? And so whenever we stub our toe or experience the strong, sharp pain in those little moments, it's almost like reality is trying to shake us awake. And and then we move to the example of driving in the car, and this is what reality is doing for us in every moment. And every moment that we aren't paying attention, we begin to experience the emotions around these stories that we tell ourselves. We begin to see the pain come in. We begin to see the frustration. And I think that this idea that you're working on developing a working version of your mind is a really, really cool one, because up until now, I very much struggled with understanding the role of the rational mind in all of this. Do I really need this? Do I really need my rational mind if I'm just living in the present moment all of the time? What role does rationality even have? And I think what you're doing is you're giving a glimpse into a higher consciousness rationality, a rational mind that gives way to creation. I think you had mentioned one of the tools that the rational mind gives us is the ability to build things. And, I'm a carpenter, so my rational mind has become quite powerful in being able to visualize and understand physically the order of operations, how things need to be built, how to do it in a way that makes them structurally sound. And you know, using that tool, I can then leverage a course of action that I can still use in any present moment, but it doesn't take me out of the present moment. It's not a story about the future or the past,
Hmm.
but it's a potential path for me to follow and do so with presence. So yeah, so I think that's a very I think that's a very, very interesting concept, upgrading
Hmm.
to this working mind.
Yeah, I just want to add I know that I explained that very mechanically, which usually is a good thing because we can see how things work, and this is very understandable for our mind before we go to the deeper or higher layers. And when people say that everything happens for a reason, and I heard that many times, and it's just a slogan that is just lingering in the air. It's like it has transformed its own expression and meaning to a to the patch for covering the wound. So people will say that just to make them feel better, but actually everything happens for a reason. What is the reason? The reason is that everything that happens, that reason is the invitation feel to feel the emotions, to feel the feelings. So everything happens for a reason. I'm relating to what you said, that the universe is bringing us these opportunities, and that's it. So the reason is go deeper, see what. It's not like try to understand why this happened to you. That's another story. It's not. It doesn't work like that. It works like you hit your toe, you feel the feelings, you see the story arising, feel the emotions behind the story, feel everything, allow everything to arise. And by doing that, this is the mechanics of how it gets dissolved. It's very much more powerful when you see a facilitator, and in the beginning at least, to be able to understand how these workings really go about. And but that's the invitation. So that's the everything happens for a reason. Yeah, that's the reason. Invitation to come to yourself, to go deeper, to really feel what's going on.
I think that is a very important distinction completely. Um, I remember when I first moved to a big city, being stuck in traffic
Mhm.
and getting, and this was not for the first time, but after many, many times of it happening, I remember getting so worked up and angry
Mhm.
in that moment. And to the point where I had no choice,
Mhm.
basically, in that sitting in traffic there in that moment, to go within and be like, there is quite literally nothing I can do right now. I mean, I can't even get out of the vehicle because I have to move. I have to move a couple of feet every minute, So it's not like I
Mhm.
can't. I'm stuck here. This is what I have to deal with,
Mhm.
and there are times if we can, there are times in life where you essentially have no choice. You are put in a situation and you were dealt cards that, as you mentioned, they all come from within. These are all things that you are creating, but they are so strong that you can't escape them. Like, this is what I need to deal with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me in that moment, it's hard to like put words to it, because in that moment I didn't try to understand what was happening to me. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
was about feeling that anger, and it was
Yeah.
about
Okay.
feeling, yeah, it was about feeling that pain, that frustration, and letting
Yeah.
it flow through me.
Just to interrupt a bit,
Yeah.
did you mean feeling that anger in the higher consciousness self, like feeling truly the anger, or just anger being so strong that you were trying to avoid it by, let's say, not having this hold up, not having this traffic jam in front of you? So that would be the avoidance. So remove the traffic and I'm okay. What was it? The first one, like feeling the anger inside you and staying with it, or trying to go away from the anger?
I think in that moment it was less deliberate. So I think I was trying to avoid it. What I was
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is I was just telling myself how ridiculous it was, really. I was sort of hard on
Oh.
myself, being like, there's nothing I
Mm-hmm.
can do here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And basically what I ended up doing was building a little program in myself that says, this is ridiculous. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
you can do here. You are
Mm-hmm.
out of control. This will continue to happen to you. So there's a story, right?
There's a
There's a
story,
story I was
judgment
being told.
story. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Telling myself that I've got this thing that happens in my life. It just is a part of my reality. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of being mad at it, I just need to accept it. So, yeah, looking at it a little bit deeper, I think I was telling myself a story about it, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. And I just want to make a very important distinction here when we say that we create for ourselves. You know, um, what I see that people, when somebody says that, let's say, I create that for myself, first of all, this can be a judgment, like I'm so bad that I create this for myself. Then we need to understand that we are not the doers in any circumstances in this world. Probably we don't have time for me to explain all depths how this comes about, but we are not the doers. So when I say that I create this for myself, we don't have a language that could explain this really sharply enough. So I create this for myself at the same time means universe is inviting me to face this, because frequency wise a compatible, an attractive frequency is coming, and I'm attracting this frequency. In that sense, I'm creating the circumstance that this frequency will come for my energy body or my frequency body to dissolve the shadow frequency. So let's say when these two frequencies coincide or get together, then there's a possibility for the flow to erupt from that, and then everything's okay. But until that flow happens, this frequency will keep coming. So me as the creator of the opportunity for this to happen is not I, like I or am the doer of it and I'm guilty of it. No. It's like my higher self is inviting that frequency, and this frequency is coming. And maybe if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you're stuck and you feel the anger, and we are invited to explore first to feel the anger and then to wait what comes up below the anger. And we can see how actually we are stuck in our lives, not in this traffic jam only, but how we are stuck in our lives. Maybe that's the, wake up call. Anyhow, this frequency is coming, and as soon as I'm able to open up to it, there's a great chance that this will dissolve. But as soon as I go into a story, and that's, again, one of our parts in our fragmented um, consciousness, or our fragmented parts are, one of them are, they're all good for us, but one of them want to protect us from the deeper feelings. So going into a story is like a part of us is saying, we need to go to a story now, because otherwise the feelings that you're gonna feel are going to be overwhelming or too much. But back to the initial idea, invitation, this I create this is like universe is creating this for my frequency field to dissolve this so the universe can flow. And I and everybody else in this traffic jam, we are all universe. We just see ourselves as separate.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure you've heard it before, but life is happening for us and not to us. I think that,
Exactly.
yeah, I
That's a
think
good one.
yeah, that's the distinction that I think you are basically making,
Mm.
and I think it's a very, very important.
Yeah, you can easily see the frequency shift. I remember hearing this for the first time, and it was like the feeling was as if the sun rose. Like, oh gosh, that's what's happening. Because before in that the life's happening to me, there is identity of a victim somehow inside. Of course, if we are talking about suffering, but life is happening to me. Why is this happening to me? There's being victimized. But on the other side, life is happening for me. The frequency that I felt was, it's like healing. Okay.
So we're getting close to our time here, and I think the place that I would like to wrap it up around is we've talked a lot about experiencing the pain as a reflection, as an event that is happening for me, so that it may move through me, so that I can dissolve stories. But what role does joy play?
Yeah, joy. It's important to make a distinction between joy and pleasure. So life is a happening, and it's our relation to it is like sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's pleasure. So if we imagine that on the left is pleasure, on the right is pain, and there's a, pendulum swinging from left to right, from left to right, which means whenever we are in pain, we will want to escape this pain by going to the left to pleasure, and inevitably pleasure will end, because everything that appears disappears, everything that arises eventually dissolves. So this pleasure will end and we will swing back to pain. And joy has nothing to do with either of them. But a general misconception is that pleasure is joy. And that's just not the case. And when we see that, the joy is, in this perspective, the joy would be seeing both. Seeing left, seeing right, seeing left, seeing right. And understanding that by seeing both and seeing the pendulum swinging, we can, from the perspective of joy, maybe slow down the pendulum to the point where it stops in the middle. So joy is the place where we are neutral, but not forcefully neutral, but really seeing everything as a happening. And my experience is that from that aspect of joy, life is worth living, is actually the best thing that can happen to me here in this time space. And it's a joyous thing because it's like a play. It's like watching God's play, how this adventure of life will unfold. So joy is being able to enjoy the play, whatever it is. It's really hard to explain it, but probably the most important distinction is it's not pleasure. If we find joy in pleasure, then we don't have joy really, because pleasure will disappear, will pass. Something pleasurable, you eat a cake, when the cake is done, you want another cake, if you find pleasure in cake. But there's no another cake. So then the joy is done. Joy is the awareness of things that do not change. And there's just one, and that is you. You as consciousness, that is never changing. Everything else changes from pain to pleasure. And being in that position of observing, seeing that is actually a joyous experience. And there's joy in that. So joy would be absence of pain and pleasure. Joy is not something that we can really describe. It's absence of pain or pleasure.
Otto, that is beautifully said. I think this has been an awesome conversation. I'm really excited for people to experience it with us. Before we go, if you just want to maybe give people a little bit of information as to how to connect with you, and then maybe speak just briefly about what you offer in your sessions as a facilitator, maybe some of the areas you like to focus on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, people can find me on bitcoin-consciousness.com website as decentralized consciousness facilitator, and they can reach me on Telegram as oro_sessions. But with having a session with me, there's one prerequisite usually, and that is that a person is in pain somehow, has reached the dead end, the dead end alley, and usually doesn't know how to turn around, or actually how to find a solution. And that's where I can really guide someone to come back to their own strengths, to their own core, their own light, by asking really important questions that person who is lost usually cannot ask themselves. But by hearing those questions, I invoke in their subconscious their own healing facilities, their own healer. So people then begin to understand that they're empowered, and they can open up to these healing processes within them. And that's basically what happens in sessions when I facilitate. And it's the interesting thing is that these sessions are rewarding for the client and the facilitator, that being me. So the process that usually is happening for both of us, which is a win-win always. So that's why I really enjoy doing that, because the most important thing in life, probably in this fiat society, is to understand that what we are doing right now should be the thing that we want to do. We shouldn't be doing things right now for something that we will enjoy later. If we do not enjoy what we're doing right now, we should change to something that we enjoy.
Beautifully said. Otto, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Yeah, goodbye.